Hey, it's me, Jen again. Can you imagine a thyroid mass so gargantuan
At its biggest, it was about 19 centimeters.
that it moves your trachea from here to here? That was Tricia's story, and we're going to be hearing it straight from her coming up.
I am so excited to talk to you today, Tricia, and it's been really awesome interacting you within our Facebook group and just seeing your story there. So, do you mind just kind of letting everyone know what your story was and where you came to this place of wanting this procedure called thyroid RFA?
Yeah. It started totally not thyroid related. I went
Mhm.
to a fertility specialist, and it was my first time to see this doctor. And he walked in the room. He was about 10 feet away from me. And he took one look at me and said, "You have a very large mass on your thyroid." And
Wow,
I was completely stunned because I wasn't there for any of that.
that's
Um,
crazy.
so I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And so he comes over and he feels it and he's like, "Yeah." And he says, "Here, I'll let me do an ultrasound right now and I'll show you." And of course,
Wow, on the
you know,
spot.
on the spot. And of course, he's not an endocrinologist, so he didn't
Yeah,
really know what it wasn't his specialty, but he was like, "Yeah, this is huge. I can't believe that no one
man.
has ever found this or seen this." Or he's like,
Yeah,
haven't your friends said anything to you, and haven't you noticed it? And I really hadn't that much.
yeah.
So he sent me to a doctor, and it was a thyroid surgeon. So I went to this surgeon, and he did an ultrasound, and told me it was huge, and said, we're gonna have to take it out. Minimum, your half of your thyroid, possibly your whole thyroid, depending on what it looks like when we get in there.
Hmm.
Um, I At that
Hmm.
point, I was just so stunned and terrified that I just went ahead and booked the surgery.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how it started.
Hmm.
It was That's how I found out about it. It was a weird way to find out about it,
Yeah, that's
but so
crazy. Because I don't want to take over the conversation, but I have to tell you, that's almost identical to how I found out about mine. I'm not
whoa.
joking.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
so crazy. Wow.
Yeah. I was at an OBGYN appointment. Doctor walked in, same thing. Oh my gosh, look at your neck. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's so crazy to me that happened to both of us. Wow, what a
Wow.
connection.
I know.
Oh man. So
It was so
after
Go
you
ahead.
had this initial, like, you booked the surgery, did you go into like research mode and start trying to figure out
Mhm.
what was really going on?
I did. I had never heard of a thyroid nodule before. I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about it. And the first step is I called my mom, who I'm really close to. She had had thyroid cancer
Mm.
about 25 years ago. So she had had her thyroid completely removed. And it wasn't a nodule like mine. It was small, like you couldn't even see hers.
Mm.
My mom said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I think you should really research this.
Mhm.
And so my mother has had 25 years worth of issues that you just wouldn't believe from that one thyroid removal surgery.
Mhm.
She said, just do your research, cancel the surgery for now, and just do your research. And then if you decide to have the surgery, then do it. But first, look at all of your options.
Mhm.
And my mother, if there's one thing she's taught me, it's how to be an advocate
That's
for my
great.
health. And
Yeah.
so I was like, yeah, you're right. I think I had just scheduled the surgery because I was just in the moment. I was just so scared.
Right.
And I'm so thankful that I canceled the surgery. And so I went into research mode, and I read over 30 books. I
Wow.
I was on the internet reading all kinds of articles, um, you know, medical journals, all kinds of stuff. I joined forums, including the one that I found you in. And I started talking to people that also had nodules, and so I did all kinds of research. One of the things I started out doing was I went to a doctor that is a whole food plant based doctor, and she said, if you change your way of eating and you go to whole food plant-based, which sometimes people call that vegan. You know, it's possible you can shrink the nodule, but it's so large that, you know, I don't know how much it could really shrink it. But I did change my way of eating, and I do think that helped heal my thyroid. I was functioning better when I was, you know, when I changed my way of eating. And that definitely helped. But as I became more aware of what was going on, I'm a singer, I'm a vocalist and a voice teacher. So I began to realize that I was having trouble singing and breathing sometimes. And I knew I was having trouble sleeping, and I don't think I was breathing right in my sleep. And so I knew that I had to do something. So I came across your group and found out about these other alternatives. So I found an endocrinologist that was pro RFA, and I went to her, and she did a really good ultrasound and explained everything. It was the first time anyone had really done that in all the doctors I've seen. And she said, "Oh my God," she said, "I don't even know how you're alive." She said, your trachea is under your ear. It's like 6 inches from where it should be.
Wow.
She showed me on the ultrasound, and I was like, oh, I mean, it looked like a S. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's
And
amazingly crazy.
Yeah. She was like, I don't know how you're breathing. I don't know how you're functioning.
Yeah.
She also said she thinks it had been growing for 20 years. So
Yeah.
I mean, it had slowly, you know, my body just adapted. And
yeah.
so,
Over such a slow incremental time, your body finds a way. So yeah.
Man. Absolutely. And she told me before she did the ultrasound, she said, I think you probably have Hashimoto's. When we look at your ultrasound, we're going to see that your thyroid's really dark and black. So probably you are going to need a thyroidectomy. And that's, you know, from a doctor who knows about RFA. And I was really sad when she said that. And when she did the ultrasound, she said, oh my God, she said, I mean, she couldn't see the half of the thyroid that had the mass on it, but she could see the other lobe. And she said, this is a pristine thyroid. This is a beautiful thyroid.
Wow.
And
so why would you want to take that out?
She said, don't do surgery. She said, why would you want to take out a perfect thyroid gland? At its biggest, it was about 19 centimeters, but it was probably bigger. She couldn't.
Oh my goodness.
She couldn't measure the whole thing because the ultrasound screen is only so big. So and it also went.
Oh my goodness.
Back in my throat too.
But so was it wrapping around like that side of your neck? Yeah.
So it wrapped around like the back of my trachea.
Oh my goodness.
So, but it was so much fluid. She said, first we have to take care of the fluid. So she drained it, and it was, I think it was about 175 cc's of fluid, which is insane.
That is huge.
Yeah. She said, you know, usually the most fluid I get is like 25, maybe 50 cc's.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was just vials and vials of fluid that she took off, and she did PEI. And she said, hopefully this will keep the fluid from coming back. And now that we have the fluid out, we can see what we're really working with. And the solid part of the mass was about 10 to 12 centimeters, something like that.
That's still enormous. But getting that fluid off makes a big difference.
It was at least half of the mass. And and I felt so much better without the fluid.
You did.
Yeah, and my trachea moved back a couple of inches just
wow.
Man. So I did feel better.
I'm sure.
And then, you know, she said, let's do RFA. Well, this particular doctor, she doesn't take insurance. So I was like, let me think about it and let me research it. And so I was going to a wedding in Ireland. I was talking to my friend that lives there, and she said, you know, you should really look into having it done over here. I mean, medical procedures here are way advanced. And so I talked to my husband. I'm like, yeah, we could look into that. And so I found a doctor, Dr. Petros, Stamatopoulos, I think is how you say his name. And so we scheduled RFA in Italy. which is going to be very affordable. And we were going to be able to do some traveling while we were there. So we were excited about that.
Yeah,
So
make the most of the trip.
Yeah. And so we were going to end up being in Europe for about a month, which we were super excited
Wow.
about. And then COVID happened. And so
Yeah.
that took care of that. So yeah, we didn't get to go. And so I was kind of back to square one. And that was hard because now, okay, well, what do I do now? And
Yeah.
so I kept researching, and I found a doctor in Utah that takes my insurance, and they had they had a really high success rate of getting insurance to cooperate with them.
That's amazing.
And they were very helpful in helping my insurance cover it. So I had to fight quite a bit to get my insurance to cover it. I had to send a lot of data, a lot of research to them. I kept appealing it over and over.
How many times did you have to appeal it to get them to finally give in?
I think it was three or four.
Wow. Good for you, sticking to your guns.
I'm stubborn. Yeah, I'm stubborn.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing in this case.
I think what kind of spurred me on was I knew that I was doing this like not only for myself, but for other patients in the future that were going to need that procedure. I'm sorry, I need to just plug in my phone really quick. Okay. So I knew that, other patients were going to be doing the same thing. And I was kind of helping to pave the way for them and educate them. I mean, they didn't know what RFA was. They didn't know anything about it. And they kept saying, a thyroidectomy is necessary. And I was like, it's actually the most unnecessary thing. And I even tried to appeal, from a business standpoint of, here's what you're going to pay out for a thyroidectomy. It was like $55,000, plus I'm going to be on medication the rest of my life, which you're going to cover. And then this over here, I think it was, I want to say it was around $5,000. So I'm like, even from a business standpoint, it's so much better for me to do the RFA. You're going to pay less money, and I'm not going to have complications that I could very well have from a thyroidectomy. And one thing I did mention earlier about my mom that I wanted to share, this was my number one reason for not wanting to have a thyroidectomy.
Right.
So my mother, when she had hers, she developed a movement disorder that's in the Parkinson's family. And it's called cervical dystonia. It's a very rare condition, but it is a genetic, like you have a gene that can cause this. And a lot of times the gene is completely dormant and you don't even know you have it and you never have any effects from it. But if you have trauma to your neck, which in my mother's case was thyroid surgery, this gene can be activated. And what happens is over time, her neck would move involuntarily. And at first it was very slight. It was just literally just like this, just a little bitty movement. Didn't affect her that much, but over time it got worse and worse and worse to where there was a point where she was completely debilitated and she couldn't drive. She's a pianist. She couldn't play the piano. I mean, she couldn't, her quality of life was very low. And there was no cure. There's no cure for cervical dystonia. There's no, how should I say it? Western medicine cure for it. Okay. And so my mother went to every doctor she could, like I said, she's an advocate. And she went to every doctor she could. And they all told her there's really nothing we can do. And so my mother went to this alternative clinic in Santa Fe. This woman who's not even a doctor, but she had cervical dystonia and figured out a regimen that cured her. And my mother is now completely 100% better.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, how wonderful for her. I'm so glad.
I know. And
that's a very good reason for you.
Yes.
Being that you said you have the same gene
gene. Yes.
Okay. So that's a really good motivation to avoid surgery.
Absolutely. I mean, after seeing what my mother had gone through.
Yeah.
I just was like, I can't risk that, especially
Yeah.
for a thyroid that is healthy and that is functioning other than having this non-cancerous nodule on it.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest motivation is, I did not want to have any kind of issue with developing cervical dystonia. There was still a slight risk with RFA, but it wasn't nearly as much of a risk because the length of time for a thyroid surgery is a lot longer. And also during RFA, I'm awake, and they
Right.
think anesthesia is one of the reasons that it can develop too. So,
Okay.
yeah, so it was, I know that's a unique and weird kind of story, but I mean, even if there wasn't the cervical dystonia element, I still would not have wanted to have a thyroidectomy in the position I was in where my thyroid was good. I just had this mass. And
well, and you mentioned you're a singer, and one of the big things that was concerning to me, as I was leaving my ENT's office, I actually encountered a woman in the lobby, and her voice was so raspy, and I overheard her telling her friend that she was there for vocal therapy. And I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, did you happen to have a thyroidectomy? Because I was just consulting with my doctor about this." And she said, "Yes, and I have permanent vocal cord, or not vocal cord, vocal nerve damage from the surgery." That was the no-go for me. That, and in addition to several other things that I had personally going on. But yeah, I mean, like you said, a unique situation like that, you better than any doctor knows you. And if you know that this is a thing that could potentially affect you and the quality of your life for the rest of your life, it is worth avoiding anything that's going to damage that. And as you were talking about the insurance side of it, the quality of life goes down for so many people after thyroidectomies, and their health goes down, and they start having to take other drugs, and they start having other problems, problems with the gallbladder, problems with their weight. I think that the average weight gain is either 20 or 30 pounds after a thyroidectomy. Most people's joints can't handle that. So then you end up with arthritis, and the list goes on and on and on. And I can totally see why that one thing, the dystonia thing, would be enough. But all those other things compounding it, it's amazing that you were able to get RFA. I'm so glad you found this doctor.
Oh my gosh. Me too. And what's interesting too, another thing that happens a lot in thyroidectomies that I was scared of, that happened to my mom, is she had 2 parathyroids that were accidentally removed during a thyroidectomy. And our parathyroids are like the size of a mustard seed. They're very very small, and it's easy to do it. In fact, I had a student that, she's an adult student, and she's a surgical tech, and she was telling me, she was like, "Yeah, we accidentally removed some parathyroids today of a patient," and she said it so casually, and I was like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, and I'm like, you have just like ruined this person's life, and you're just acting like it's not a big deal. But like, for my mother, when her parathyroids were removed, first of all, it took them a long time to know it happened. Sometimes they don't know that they do it. And so she went for years feeling horrible and never could figure out why.
And it was because of her calcium being dysregulated?
Her calcium. And so what happened is she ended up developing calcium deposits all over her body. So she's had to have 2 different foot surgeries, one on each foot, because she had calcium deposits on her heel. And she had to be off your feet for 12 weeks for each surgery.
Oh my goodness.
And that further exacerbated, her cervical dystonia. It's just been a barrage of complications that, I mean, even though they know that her parathyroids are removed, it's a constant trying to figure out what her calcium level should be, and they can never quite get it right. So I didn't want to go through any of that. So I was so thankful to have found your group.
Well, I'm so glad you did too. And I hope that we were able to help you figure some things out.
Oh, yeah.
That's the end of this segment. To keep watching, click here. Or YouTube thinks you might like this video. If the story resonates with you, give this video a thumbs up or consider subscribing. And never forget to always educate yourself and be your own health advocate.